This doctor almost died and says he can prove heaven exists.
I'm a bit skeptical, but your story was so clear. What you're about to see may change everything you thought you knew about life and death. It did for one neurosurgeon who called himself a skeptic. That was until his near-death experience made him believe in an afterlife. Now he says he can prove heaven exists. Meet the doctor who's being called a medical miracle, Eben Alexander. As a Harvard-educated neurosurgeon, Dr. Eben Alexander was defined by science and logic, dismissing all claims of the afterlife. But 4 years ago, a rare bacterial meningitis left him in a coma, on the brink of death.
At 4:30 a.m. on Monday, November 10th, 2008, I almost died. I woke up that morning with an extremely intense headache. Within 2 or 3 hours, my brain started to shut down, and that's when I lost consciousness completely and went into coma. I was gone from this world. I saw something that was nothing short of a miracle. I saw heaven.
What he experienced not only spawned his book, Proof of Heaven, it also redirected his entire belief system.
I was in a very lovely, bright valley with puffy pink-white clouds. I was traveling on a butterfly wing with a beautiful girl beside me, and she had a wide smile, sparkling blue eyes. I do believe that consciousness exists independent of the body and brain, and that heaven is real. Our souls are eternal.
Is Dr. Alexander simply a medical miracle? Or is his experience proof that heaven really exists? Dr. Eben Alexander is joining us. You're a scientist, a skeptic. I mean, we're trained to believe in cold, hard facts. So what convinced you, for sure, that there's a heaven?
The most powerful piece of this journey was a realization that came a few months later, as I had been through this incredibly real and beautiful experience, but I wondered when I was reading other near-death experiences, where was my dad? I mean, he had passed over 4 years earlier. If there's one person I wanted to see, it would have been my father, and he was nowhere to be found during the NDE. And who was this beautiful girl? The guardian angel on the butterfly wing. Had no clue. I remembered her face perfectly. Turns out I was adopted, and I had given up on finding my birth family. But then in 2000, I found out that my parents had actually gotten married and had 3 children, that one of my siblings had already passed over. And it was 4 months after my coma that I actually got a picture of that sister who had passed over 10 years before my coma, and saw that she was indeed my guardian angel.
So what's her name?
Her name is Betsy.
So this picture we're looking at, Betsy, is the person you saw when you were on those butterfly wings?
Yes. Yes, and it was the most shocking moment in this life to realize that that's exactly who was there.
The book really is very well written. I applaud you for that, because it's hard to take a life experience that you had and reduce it to words. But you describe in the book so vividly what happened to you. And listen, I've dealt with this a lot in my own practice. You're not the person I've had in my life who's had a near-death experience. And I must admit, I'm a bit skeptical, because I've always had a tough time reconciling what my patients were telling me, who had almost died and come back.
Right.
But your story was so clear. I'd love you to share it with everybody.
Well, it really important to understand that my meningitis was so severe that the first thing I remember from deep in coma, I had no memory whatsoever of my life. And it was a coarse, monotonous underground that seemed to go forever. I was rescued from that by this beautiful spinning white light, filamentous light. That was a gateway with a valley up on a butterfly wing with this beautiful guardian angel, Betsy, my sister, who I later discovered to be that guardian angel. And she was with me every time we went through there. A sense of divine as a warm breeze blowing through, and knowing that that all-loving God was there through every bit of it. And this reassuring message from Betsy that I was loved and cherished and would be taken care of. And then it was outside of this entire universe all of higher dimensional space and time collapsed down in this gigantic, infinite black void that I call the core, and that was with that divine, all-loving, creative power, who many would call God.
If I could just, again, I'm going to ask you this because I'm earnestly curious about this experience and what light you can shed on it, because you're a neurosurgeon. I mean, you're trained as I am to look at this stuff. I've always believed there's an element of hallucination when I heard these stories. Why are you so sure that wasn't happening with the incredibly precise and elegant description you're giving to us?
Well, I think for me the most important feature was the fact that I had a very severe, prolonged case of bacterial meningitis. And if I'd had any other cause for being in coma, it would have left part of the cortex still working, but the meningitis was so efficient.
Show this to us. You know what? This is actually a scan from Dr. Alexander when he was lying in an ICU with a less than 10% chance of surviving. Just give you that number.
Right. And what you can see here, this is a scan, my eyes showing right up here on the top of the image, but then you can see these kind of white streaks down here. These are in regions of enhancement where there's a lot of pus that is filling the valleys over the surface of the brain. And so really the entire cortex was affected and was inactivating all of my ability to think as a human. Everything that we see, vision, hearing, all that's in the cortex. When the cortex is wiped out, then there's really no capability for any kind of experience at all.
So as a scientist, you're saying this couldn't be hallucinations. It had to be something different.
Right.
How did this experience affect what you think about death?
Well, it's so liberating because I know that death is merely a transition and that, in fact, our consciousness lives on. In fact, it's freed up to a much richer awareness and knowing when we leave the physical body.
Fascinating. Well, we're going to continue on this. Coming up, can this really happen? Where does science end and God begin? We're finding out. That's next.